Celebrating 49 years on the air, award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, we look back on how it affected Mississippi poultry. In Southern Gardening, a landscape wonderland, Eddie takes us on a magical trip to a fairy garden. In the markets, a surprising factor on what's likely driving those beef and cattle prices. And in our feature, can you really do what you want with your own land? Maybe not. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week. This week marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, one of the deadliest and most expensive hurricanes in U.S. history. It hit land near the Louisiana-Mississippi border on August 29, 2005. A few months afterward, former Farm Week anchor Artis Ford produced a story analyzing the damage done to the Mississippi poultry industry, the state's top commodity. 10 years later, in 2015, Farm Week ran an updated version of that story. And now, 10 more years later, we bring you an encore of that story. Here's former anchor Artis Ford.
Well, about 10:30 that Saturday, Monday morning, we lost power, and it just went downhill for probably the next 12 hours. Like I said, you saw the pictures on the chicken houses that tore them up at the top of our house, our equipment shed, and it changed our life forever.
Donald and Tammy Sellers share a unique bond with the chickens on their farm. They're all Hurricane Katrina survivors. The hurricane peeled the tin off the roofs of the chicken houses as well as the Sellers' home. The Sellers run what's called a hen operation under contract to Wayne Farms. The hens and roosters produce fertilized eggs from which broiler chickens are grown. Sellers was concerned the shock of the storm, the disruption of the birds' normal routine, and the roof construction over their heads would cause them to lay less eggs, but it didn't.
They had just started laying, and I don't remember just how many eggs we was getting at the time, but production just kept coming on up every day. You know, we was running fans and on our generators and stuff, and it was inconvenient, but we made it through it, you know, and the birds seemed like it never bothered them, putting their tops back on and everything.
When Hurricane Katrina survivors share their photos and their stories with you, it's an attempt to give you an idea of what the storm was like. But no photo can convey the scope of the damage or the mental stress of wondering if your home or livelihood will be destroyed. The Sellers, however, have kept a good perspective on their losses.
Well, you really didn't know, you know, just when it was going to stop. Because you just kept getting pounded, and you're thinking, you know, everything I work for is going down the drain right here. But, you know, then you look at your neighbor and you think, well, I'm really blessed that I didn't get any more.
That whole hurricane and its push up through the state and its winds, the charted winds and everything, just went right through the heart of the industry.
There are more than 1,900 broiler farms scattered among 51 Mississippi counties. 27 counties, however, have 10 or more farms each. These lay right in Katrina's path. The Mississippi Poultry Association says 206 chicken houses were destroyed. Another 353 were damaged to the point repairs could take up to a year and a half. In all, 75% of the state's almost 7,000 chicken houses suffered some sort of damage. The industry, however, is recovering much quicker than most ever believed it could. Some houses do remain out of service as growers deal with their insurance companies, or older growers ponder whether to take this opportunity to retire.
I just didn't think we could get it done back this quick. But, you know, the contractors, the contract producers, Sanderson, they've all put forth an excellent effort in getting everything back going and back in production.
We had the roof completely off of it, just a few pieces of tin left hanging. The doors, all the doors were tore off, insulation pulled out, and now all the curtains were gone.
2 of the 4 chicken houses owned by Danny Rustin of Jones County were heavily damaged by Katrina. Rustin raises pullets and roosters for Wayne Farms. Pullets are young females that haven't begun to lay eggs. He lost about 100 roosters, but only a few pullets. It took $90,000 in just over 5 weeks to get his operation repaired.
I just got lucky. I had a good insurance company. They came on out and took care of it. Plus, I ran into some guys that build poultry houses, and they were in a slack time, so they came right on in and put my roof on.
I just wanted to cry. Honestly, I just wanted to cry. And of course, all the tin was off of this house. All the curtains were shredded on both houses, and we had 6-8-week-old chickens in those houses. So there was nothing else we could do. I mean, you know, they had to be fed and watered no matter what.
Stella McDoniel has grown pullets for 32 years for Sanderson Farms of Laurel. She and her husband Larry managed to get their houses repaired in a month's time. Insurance covered their losses.
They had to totally rebuild that end of that house that had collapsed inside, and had to put new curtains on both houses. So it took a good month, and I believe my husband said probably all told, I mean, it just wiped out brooders, water lines, everything. It took everything. It just tore everything up in that half. About $46,000.
Number one house was nailed on with regular nails. This house was just built 8 years later, was screwed in, so we didn't lose a piece of tin off of the number 2 house.
The Mississippi Poultry Association estimates total bird losses at $6 million due to Katrina, much less than initially expected. That equals 8% of the 828 million broiler chickens Mississippi farmers grew in 2004. Mississippi is the 5th largest broiler meat producer, growing 10% of the nation's total. Poultry is Mississippi's largest agricultural commodity by far, with a production value of around $2 billion a year. That figure doesn't include the value added by the infrastructure and jobs needed to support the industry.
Any given day, right now, we have 150 million birds out in the poultry houses of the state.
The first thing you noticed, the roof line was just collapsed like a V down 3/4 of the house, all the way down to the fans on the end. The inside walls or side walls had caved in on the sides, and the front of the house was leaning in. A lot of chickens had either got blown out or were climbing out over the top and jumping off, and a lot of them.
Jason Pickering is standing beside his completely rebuilt number 3 broiler house. It's believed a tornado spawned by Katrina hit it and his 3 other chicken houses. He was about to build 2 more houses when the storm struck. The construction company delayed the start of the new houses and repaired the damaged ones in 2 weeks. It took another 3 months to rebuild the destroyed house. The cost to Pickering's insurance company was sizable.
It was between $350,000 and $400,000. This house, like I said, was completely destroyed, and the front of the number 2 house was completely destroyed. A large amount of tin and ceiling damage to the other houses also.
Mike Pepper points out new broiler houses are expensive, and a new broiler farm is a big investment.
But I've heard anywhere probably 180 on the low side up to 200,000 per house. And most farms now, when they are building, not adding on, but when they're building, they'll build 6 houses. So you can add up there. I mean, it's $1 million easy to put in an operation.
Jason Pickering remains optimistic about the poultry business. He's still adding the 2 new houses and believes Katrina has made the industry stronger, not weaker.
Looking back, Sanderson really took good care of us, and the government aid and everything really helped out a lot. So I feel really positive about the future, even if something like this does happen again, that everything will be in place that we'll make it and be better off in the long run, I believe.
Needless to say, poultry is still the state's top commodity. 20 years after Katrina, it's valued at nearly $4 billion, twice its value when the hurricane hit.
On the lighter side, sometimes all it takes to make your landscape something special is a little pixie dust. Here's the wizard himself, Dr. Eddie Smith, with this week's Southern Gardening segment about fairy gardens.
Today, Southern Gardening is in Hattiesburg, Mississippi at Ross Mansion Bed and Breakfast. They have some enchanting fairy gardens on the property. Let's take a look at some of these magical gardens. At the entrance to the gardens, an old log planter with creeping jenny plants, Gerber daisies, a begonia, and a few other plants sets the stage for the gardens. An old bed headboard is used as a backdrop for the space, and various colored fairy houses are placed to add a whimsical feel. I love how areas underneath the large oak trees have been transformed into magical fairy villages. Moss is used throughout these areas, along with various other shade-tolerant plants. Pea gravel and other rocks are used to represent roads and pathways in the villages. There are many old bird baths in the gardens that have been transformed into magical fairy wonderlands. Each one has its own unique theme and decor. Moss, succulents, and many other small plants are used in the bird bath areas to help create the fairy wonderland setting. I love how antique, recycled objects, such as this old wagon, have been incorporated into the gardens and provide the perfect area for a fairy village setting. An old wheelbarrow, used as a fairy garden village, is another example of how you can repurpose and reuse objects to enhance your garden spaces. If you are ever in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, you should stop by Ross Mansion Bed and Breakfast and see their enchanting, magical fairy gardens. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a short break, but stick around. Coming up, the case of the Swamp Buster Challenge. Should you be able to do anything you want with your own land? A common question, and one farmer sued the government to be able to do just that. But it's a complicated wetlands story based on a 40-year-old law that says otherwise, and other farmers are supporting the opposition. Challenging the Swamp Buster rule, coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith, and their right to make their own plans and arrive at their own decisions, and their ability and power to enlarge their lives and plan for the happiness of those they love. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. That these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
This week in the market, some updates from the USDA on cattle stocks and the current state of our row crops. Also, Dr. Will Maples, MSU Extension livestock economist, talks more about current cattle and beef prices, how the markets are balancing supply and demand, and what we can look forward to the coming years as the herd rebuilds. But first, here's the Cattle on Feed and Crop Progress reports. In this month's Cattle on Feed report, more trending down in numbers reflecting this year's continued slide. Cattle and calves on feed for the slaughter market totaled about 11 million head, down 2% from August last year. Placements in feedlots during July totaled a bit over 1.5 million head, 6% down from last year. Marketings of fed cattle during July totaled 1.75 million head, 6% down from last year. Other disappearance, which are losses due to death, movements to other feedlots or pasture, or natural causes, down 9% compared to last year. In the 18 highest corn-producing states, dough stage, which is when the kernels accumulate starch and thicken, at 83%, the same as this time last year, but 1% lower than the 4-year average. Dented stage, when the kernels start to form a dent at their crown due to starch amount and moisture loss, at 44%. Also the same as last year and the 4-year average. Condition looking pretty good, with 65% reporting good to excellent. In the 18 highest soybean producing states, Mississippi included, setting pods at 89%, 1% higher than this time last year, and the same as the 4-year average. Condition also positive, with 67% reporting good to excellent. In the 15 highest cotton-producing states, Mississippi also included, setting bolls stage, which is when the fertilized flowers turn into bolls, at 81%, 7% lower than this time last year, and 6% lower than the 4-year average. Condition not very encouraging, with 40% reporting good to excellent.
I think beef prices are going to continue to go up. Because you think about how long it takes for beef supplies to change, cattle supplies haven't even changed yet. And beef supplies are always a lag to cattle supplies. So once you really start expanding the herd, it still takes a while for those new calves to turn into beef production. So I think we're in a period of higher beef prices for quite a while. It could be the next couple of years before we really start to see beef supplies change significantly. So I think this is where we got to be a little bit careful about what we call demand. And so if we look back, 2013, 2014, we had low cattle supplies at those times, and then we ended up with low beef supplies because of that. And so you saw per capita consumption of beef drop. And so there was a lot of discussion about, people aren't eating as much beef, they don't like beef as much, they don't demand beef as much. I would suggest that per capita consumption was lower because beef production was lower. So there was less out there for us to eat. And so I think that's what's happening here too. I do think we're going to see per capita consumption of beef go down because we're producing less of it. It's just not out there. That doesn't mean that beef demand has decreased, because the beef that is out there, people are paying a lot of money for. And so beef demand has still been quite strong, even though we may see people eat less of it.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Looks like cotton's going to continue having a rough year, while beef cattle something of a mini boom in prices. But as we certainly know, prices can only get so high before the consumers simply can't afford it. And that's when the big drop comes.
The Swamp Buster rule is a provision in the '85 Farm Bill that promotes conservation, but is often called government overreach. Here in a partnership with Detroit PBS is the story of one landowner who challenged Swamp Buster and the farmers who rallied against that challenge.
John Gilbert is a fourth-generation farmer. He and his brother Greg raise hogs, beef cattle, and soybeans on 800 acres of land in Hardin County, Iowa.
In this era, when we have virtual this and virtual that and virtual just about everything, the land is probably one of the realest things we have. And it is really something we need to be cherishing, because, quite frankly, all life on Earth depends on how well we look after our soils.
Nearly 120 miles to the east, Steve Besler and his wife Ellie Gadet own a farm near Worthington, Iowa.
I grew up on my family's farm about 20 miles southeast of here.
It's something I've always loved. My first task as a kid was to pick eggs. And from there, we went to bottle feeding calves. We dairy farmed and raised hogs growing up. Farming's been in my blood, and it's thick as can be. So there's no getting the farming out of me.
It's safe to say that for Steve, Ellie, and the Gilbert brothers, farming is a way of life. But there's a pending court case that could impact their way of life by stripping away what many environmentalists consider to be the last guardrail against the destruction of precious wetlands. The case is CTM Holdings LLC versus USDA, and the guardrail is a provision in the U.S. Farm Bill called Swamp Buster. Katie Garvey is an attorney with the Environmental Law and Policy Center in Chicago. She's intervening in this case, representing Iowa farmers.
I don't have any reason to doubt that the plaintiff feels genuinely and subjectively aggrieved that he's not allowed to do whatever he wants with his land and get free money from the government. But that is not a legally cognizable injury. We might call that feelings, we might call that opinions, we might call that entitlement. It's not a legal injury.
Jim Conlon, a hedge fund manager in suburban Chicago, is challenging Swamp Buster by suing the federal government. His investment firm, CTM Holdings, owns more than 1,000 acres of farmland in Iowa. The land at the center of this court case is a 72-acre parcel near the small town of Delaware, Iowa, population 140, which Conlon rents out to a local farmer. About 9 acres of that land are considered wetlands. Under the Swamp Buster provision, the USDA pays Conlon in the form of subsidies for not plowing those 9 acres. Conlon argues that the Swamp Buster provision is unconstitutional.
And the reason I say that is because the federal government prohibits it from being used for anything that has any economic value at all. You can't farm it, you can't build on it, you can't clear it, take the stumps out of it, and the underlying land is probably worth $20,000 an acre. If you could, it's worth zero. It's actually worth less than zero.
But Swamp Buster is purely voluntary. So why doesn't Conlon just opt out of the program?
You couldn't participate in any of those programs. That would make it difficult for a farmer to rent that land because the federal government's involvement in agriculture is pervasive. It's difficult for a farmer, a renter, for example, to operate without USDA supports.
Conlon maintains that the 9 acres of wetlands on his property are not always wet and are not connected to any other body of water.
I've never met an actual real farmer that has anything good to say about the wetland laws and regulations. They despise them. I don't know who the hobby farmers are that are near there or what environmental groups they're part of. But if you interviewed 100 farmers in Iowa of various sizes, I don't think you could find one out of that typical 100 that would share that view.
Gilbert and other farmers are concerned about increased flooding on their farms if Conlon wins and Swamp Buster is overturned. Wetlands slow water down, storing floodwater and preventing it from inundating farms, homes, and riverfront towns further downstream. That's why Steve and Ellie are concerned.
We're downstream from the land in question in this lawsuit. We're about 12 miles southeast of this wetlands in question. And this is far greater than one stream and one wetland in Iowa. This directly comes down and affects us and affects our neighbors.
A recent study conducted by the Union of Concerned Scientists found that 30 million acres of wetlands in the upper Midwest, including the Great Lakes region, provide nearly $23 billion in annual flood mitigation for homeowners. Over the long term, the study estimates that protecting these wetlands could prevent between $323 billion and more than $700 billion in residential flood damages in the upper Midwest. But for Conlon, this case comes down to the rights of landowners.
I'm pro-environment. I'm pro-collective action, but I'm also pro-property rights, which is if you're going to take from me for the benefit of society generally, including me, you have to pay me.
For the farmers fighting to keep Swamp Buster, the lawsuit hits closer to home.
Those of us who work the land, we leave footprints and shadows on the land. You know, the ethic we have, the relationship we have with the land is totally foreign to a lot of the outside people who are coming in and basically prostituting the land.
On May 29, 2025, a federal judge ruled against CTM Holdings. CTM said they planned to appeal, but no appeal was filed before the July 28th deadline.
A complex issue sure to be tested in court again. Well, soon we'll announce this year's Logger of the Year, but next week, one more chance to meet the reigning winner.
His logging company is well known for its operational excellence, and he makes it a regular practice to invite forestry students from a local college to his job sites.
Bottom line, he sets the bar very high and works hard to perpetuate his standard of excellence. The 2024 Mississippi Logger of the Year. That's next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.